Bianca McCall is a retired professional women's basketball player and licensed clinical therapist who has been a proud owner and operator of Behavioral Health Option DBA Reach It Now, headquartered in Las Vegas, Nevada. Bianca, a renowned speaker, is widely regarded as a subject matter expert in the social cultural impact of injury and trauma and areas of mental, emotional, and behavioral health. Her LinkedIn About section tells us that she's an experienced chief executive officer with a demonstrated history of working in the hospital and healthcare industry, skilled in medicine, training, public speaking, nonprofit organization, and crisis intervention. Bianca is a strong business development professional with a master's degree focused in marriage and family therapy counseling from the University of Phoenix. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together and help me welcome Bianca McCall as she delivers her speech today on increasing resilience and peak performance. Bianca.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So today I'm here to talk about the burning question of how do we retain our employees from a lens of peak performance and resilience. And really it starts with a shift in the factory worker paradigm, right? Because we have this idea that an employee has the sole purpose of producing or an additional purpose of performing at peak levels, operating a machine. But certainly, amid pandemic and post-pandemic, we realize that it goes beyond kind of operating a machine, that we need to shift that paradigm and focus and begin to conceptualize an employee as an integrated person, and a person with a purpose to be the power behind the vision of the organization and to promote a positive health culture within the organization. So for most of you who've heard me speak before, I'm a storyteller by nature. So I want to share a story about a woman who wakes up hours before her family of 5. And she wakes up hours earlier because she needs to prepare breakfast and lunches and dinner for that day. And she needs to hunt around the home for matching socks and shoes and uniforms. She needs to check parent portal and update calendars and feed the pet that her family members promised her she would not take care of. All before getting herself ready for work. And then she drives across town in traffic, dropping off kiddos along the way, holding on to coffee, spilling coffee on thankfully dark-colored pants, arrives at her office, opens up her email account to 47 messages, all of which are some variation of can you, will you, meet me, calendar invite, a new memorandum, because things are always changing, right? The rules, the roles, the responsibilities, the policies are always changing, but what doesn't change is your pay. Now there's deadlines that are approaching, evaluations are due. So beyond the stress and beyond the feeling of being overwhelmed, the constant expectation is that she has to perform and produce under any circumstances. And even when those circumstances are characterized by, well, she's being bullied at work. She's overworked. She's underpaid. She's undervalued. She's isolated. Now, the mental health culture of this organization tells her that she has to sacrifice that sense of peace and resolve. She has to sacrifice self in order to perform and to produce under any circumstances. So the first company that entices her with a pay that's higher than what she's making, or pay just enough to justify leaving her job, she's gone. I want to talk to you about a patrol officer. A patrol officer who's oftentimes first or second on the scene of any injury or any incident. exposed to violence and death. So this patrol officer, he gets a call one day, and there's a 13-year-old boy who's attempted suicide. And he's hanging from a third-story balcony, and his mother is struggling to hold on to him, as his life is also hanging in the balance. So this patrol officer and his partner go out to the call, and it's because of the prompt response of this patrol officer that he saves the 13-year-old boy's life. Now, the mental health culture of this workplace example is that era of fraternity. They celebrate and they grieve together, usually in a bar and with alcohol involved. And what this patrol officer is internalizing is that today was a good day, but one of many in which he doesn't get there on time. He's not able to save a life. And how do you cope with that level of stress in your workplace? Especially when the fraternity, the culture, is to cope by drinking alcohol. Now the same patrol officer, because of the stress, he's isolated, he's alienated from his friends, from his family, from his wife, from his children. So on another night, he goes out with his wife, and they get into another of their many arguments. And it carries over to the car ride home and up into walking into the house where their two children are waiting for them. Now, an argument, this patrol officer goes into one room, and the wife goes into another room with her teenage son. The room that the patrol officer goes into is the one that has his firearm. He goes into the room with his wife and teenage son, and he shoots, and he injures his wife and teenage son. He leaves that room, goes into the next, and shoots and kills his daughter. And he turns the firearm on himself, and he dies by suicide that night. These are true stories. True stories and counts of recent events. These are not isolated incidents. And to be honest with you, these are not far uncommon from a lot of people's experiences in the workforce industry that they're in. Overwhelmed, overworked, undervalued, lacking resilience, lacking those connections because of being isolated by some of those feelings of anxiety, toxic stress, depression. These are experiences that are impacting workforce industries, across the U.S., in virtually every single industry. In fact, according to the Department of Labor statistics, 70% of the U.S. workforce report having feelings of anxiety, toxic stress, and depression. And what that lack of resiliency, how that translates to high turnover, we've seen a correlating statistic that 60% of the workforce industries have experienced turnover in the year 2021. And what does that mean to businesses and to companies? There's a cost to that that's devastating to any company in any industry. It's also estimated by the Department of Labor statistics that it costs, in order to replace an employee, it costs 30% of their salary, their annual salary. Now that's just the direct costs for recruiting, interviewing, the onboarding. Let's talk about the indirect costs. The indirect costs are lower productivity, lost revenue, lower morale, and lack of resilience that sustains life. Life of the organization, life of the person that powers the vision of that organization. So how do we take the conversation beyond retaining employees for cost value? We have to begin to conceptualize that we are talking about people. People that belong, or their sense of belonging is tied to the reason why they're working for that organization. The sense of belonging is what we all return to that motivates us, the internal factors that motivate us to do the work that we do. And when we talk about peak performance, we're not just talking about work performance. We're talking about all of us performing in multiple areas of our lives. We're performing at work, sure, but we're also performing as parents. We're performing as spouses, as friends, as community members. And an organization that supports a person to achieve peak performance in all areas of their life is an organization that retains its employees. Because creating a positive mental health culture that encourages help seeking and it empowers and supports the pathways to receiving care, quality care, and creating a psychologically safe environment so that we can identify, we can communicate, and we can reach out when we're in need of help. That goes hand in hand with retention. How do we retain our employees? How do we improve resilience? I have an answer. The answer is reach in now. So I mentioned that I developed a mobile application. And it's unique because we're leveraging technology in a way where we can integrate the necessary resilience training, trauma-informed training to help us identify and become more self-aware so that we can become resilient, reshape our identities each time that we are confronted with a traumatic event. Each time we are confronted with a challenge or adversity, which in all workforce industry, this is on a daily basis. And each time we are confronted with these challenges, we are also presented with an opportunity to reshape our identities. If we embrace the fact that we will be challenged at work, we will be stressed, if we embrace that fact and set up these protective factors, which include having supports, people to talk to. Some of us just need somebody to talk to. But if we set up this level of support, then we can respond with post-traumatic growth as opposed to falling to post-traumatic stress. With Reach In Now, the application integrates that training. And in addition to that, in addition to the hours of audio and video content, the unique feature that no other mobile application has in this moment, does not exist, is that Reach In Now provides a direct link to live peer supports through the National Alliance of Mentally Ill, NAMI, but live peer supports that are trained and qualified in mental health de-escalation, suicide prevention, and substance abuse, addiction, and treatment histories. But we connect you with live peer supports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days out of the year. And through the NAMI organization making strides, they've also created a Caring Contacts program that follows up with our users for 90 days after they've contacted those warm lines. And follows up in the means and methods of text messages and calls, sending postcards. Because as we know, when we experience a mental health crisis, things may stabilize and be okay for moments at a time. But moments later, days later, weeks later, months later, years later, when seasons change, our thoughts of that crisis, our memories of that crisis and that trauma may be reactivated. So having that level of support is important. And this is something that's not only a possibility, it's a responsibility of organizations to be able to provide this alternative employee assistance to their organizations. With reach in now, we understand that we're talking about identities, and that no one person has one singular identity. Again, we're performing as parents, as employees, as citizens in the community, and our identities are constantly being reshaped. So there's a role and there's a responsibility of the employer to take an active role in reshaping those identities of the employees. Encouraging employees to promote positive mental health culture. It's about value. Because an employee that knows he or she, or under any non-binary certain terms, is of value or contributing value to the organization that in turn values them, they begin to value the relationship between themselves and the organization. So how do we retain employees? We look at an employee as a person. Integration is a key concept in this because as a human race, as groups or races of people, and as a person, we are fractured right now. There's so many points of contention that keeps us disconnected, again, isolated, siloed. So an organization that encourages us to integrate, to love all parts of ourselves, to perform highly with all aspects of our identities in our lives, again, is an organization that retains its employees. Thank you so much for your time today.
BowmanDigitalMedia.com